I never imagined that my perfect marriage could end up like this. Tom and I had been together for 10 years and had a beautiful life together. We were both successful in our careers and had a lovely home with our son, Jane. Our friends and family always envied the strong bond we shared. It was a typical Friday night, and we were relaxing at home after a busy week. Tom had just made us dinner, and we were sitting together in the living room chatting about our plans for the weekend. He had suggested that we take a day trip to the beach, and I was excited about the idea. As we sat together, Tom suddenly got up to make some tea. He knew that I always liked a cup of tea before bed. He returned with 2 cups, and we continued our conversation as we sipped on our drinks. A few minutes later, I started to feel strange. My head became heavy, and I felt sleepy. I struggled to keep my eyes open, and before I knew it, I had fallen into a deep sleep. I woke up hours later with a start. The house was dark, and I felt disoriented. I couldn't remember what had happened, and my head was throbbing. I got up and walked around the house, but something felt off. As I walked into the living room, I noticed that our safe was open, and all the money we had saved for years was missing. My heart raced as I realized that Tom was nowhere to be found. Panic set in, and I started to feel sick. "Tom!" I called out. "Tom, where are you?" No response. I tried calling him on his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As I sat down on the couch trying to gather my thoughts, I noticed a strange smell. It was the tea that Tom had made for us. That's when it hit me. He must have put something in my tea to make me fall asleep. I felt betrayed. How could he do this to me? We had a perfect life together, or so I thought. "Tom, how could you do this?" I whispered to myself. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal as I sat on the couch, trying to piece together what had happened. The missing money, the open safe, and Tom's disappearance all seemed connected, but I couldn't understand why he had done that. As I sat there, I realized I couldn't remember falling asleep. It was like someone had turned off a switch, and I'd just fallen asleep. Then I remembered the cup of tea that Tom had made for us. I got up and went into the kitchen, where the kettle was still boiling. I looked at the cup Tom had given me, and then I noticed something strange. The tea had a strange taste, almost bitter, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. And then I realized that Tom had gone somewhere, so I called his phone. "Tom, why aren't you home?" I said. "What's wrong, honey?" said Tom. "I don't feel well," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "and I've noticed that the tea tastes strange." "Maybe you're sick with something," he said. But I knew I wasn't. Something else was going on, and Tom was in the middle of it. I tried to stay calm and composed, but my thoughts were racing. "Tom, do you know anything about the missing money?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you talking about?" Tom's face turned pale. "The money we've been saving for years. It's gone, and neither are you," I said, my voice trembling with anger. Tom took a deep breath and looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I had to do it." "What do you mean you had to do it?" I asked, my voice rising. "Why did you have to steal our money and disappear?" "I can't explain right now," Tom said, his voice breaking. "But I promise you, everything will be all right. Trust me." But I couldn't trust him. Not anymore. The man I thought I knew turned out to be a stranger, and I had to know the truth. After that phone call, I couldn't get through to him anymore. It was like he had evaporated. The days that followed Tom's disappearance were a blur. I felt like I was living in a nightmare, and I couldn't wake up. I kept replaying the events of that night over and over in my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. I had gone to the police, but they couldn't find any leads. Tom had disappeared without a trace, taking all our money with him. I felt alone, betrayed, and angry. As I sat in the empty house, I realized that I had no idea who Tom really was. The man I had married, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger. He had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and I didn't know how to move on. One evening, I was sitting in the living room, staring at the empty space where the safe used to be, When the doorbell rang, I got up and walked to the door, wondering who it could be. When I opened the door, I saw a woman standing in front of me. She was young, pretty, and had a nervous look on her face. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry to bother you," the woman said, looking at me with tears in her eyes, "but I think I know where your husband is." I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. "And who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm sorry," the woman said. "My name is Sarah. I've been seeing Tom for the past few months." My heart sank. It all made sense now. Tom had been cheating on me, stealing our money, and running away with another woman. "How could he do this to me?" I whispered, feeling the tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, placing her hand on my shoulder. "But I had to tell you, he's planning to leave the country tomorrow, and he's taking all your money with him." I felt a wave of anger and determination wash over me. I couldn't let Tom get away with this. I had to find him and make him pay for what he had done. "I have to go," I said, wiping away my tears. "Thank you for telling me." As I closed the door behind me, I knew that I had to act fast. Tom had betrayed me, and it was time for me to get back at it. After Sarah left, I spent the whole night researching and making plans. I couldn't let Tom get away with what he had done. I had to find him and make him pay. The next morning, I woke up early and started my search. I went to all the places Tom and I had visited together, trying to find a clue. I went to his workplace, his favorite restaurants, and even his gym. But there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I felt frustrated and angry, but I refused to give up. As I was leaving Tom's gym, I saw a man standing outside. He looked like he was waiting for someone, and I had a feeling that it was Tom. I approached the man, trying to act casual. "Excuse me, do you know where Tom is?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man looked at me suspiciously. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm his wife," I said, trying to sound convincing. The man looked at me with surprise. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know he was married. Tom hasn't been here in a while. I think he canceled his membership." I felt a surge of disappointment. I had been so close, yet so far. As I was walking back to my car, I saw a flyer for a charity event that Tom and I had attended together in the past. I had a feeling that he might be there trying to lay low. I drove to the event, hoping that I was right. When I arrived, I saw Tom standing at the bar, talking to a group of people. He looked calm and composed, as if he hadn't just stolen all our money and betrayed me. I approached him, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. "Tom, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tom turned around and looked at me with surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I know what you did," I said, my voice rising with anger. "You stole our money and ran away with another woman." Tom looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I had to do it." "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "It's complicated," Tom said, avoiding my gaze. "But I promise you, everything will be okay. Let's talk about this later, in private." But I knew that I couldn't trust him. Not anymore. The man I thought I knew was a stranger, and I had to find a way to get back at him. After Sarah left, I spent the whole night studying and making plans. I couldn't let Tom get away with what he'd done. I had to find him and make him pay. The next morning, I woke up early and began my search. I went to all the places Tom and I had been together, trying to find some clue. I went to his work, to his favorite restaurants, and even to his gym, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I felt frustration and anger, but I didn't give up. As I was leaving Tom's gym, I saw a man standing outside. He looked like he was waiting for someone, and I had a feeling it was Tom. I approached the man, trying to act casual. "Excuse me, do you know where Tom is?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The man looked at me incredulously. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm his wife," I said, trying to sound convincing. The man looked at me in surprise. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know he was married. Tom hasn't been here in a long time. I think he canceled his membership." I felt a surge of disappointment. I was so close, but so far away. As I walked back to my car, I saw a flyer for a charity event that Tom and I had attended together in the past. I had a feeling he might be there, trying to look. I went to the event, hoping I was right. When I arrived, I saw Tom standing at the bar talking to a group of people. He looked calm and collected, like he hadn't stolen all our money and betrayed me. I approached him, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. "Tom, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Tom turned and looked at me in surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "I know what you did," I said, my voice rising with anger. "You stole our money and ran off with another woman." Tom looked at me with sadness in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I had to do it." "Why did you do it?" I asked, my voice shaking with emotion. "It's complicated," Tom said, avoiding my gaze. "But I promise you it will be okay. Let's talk about it later, in private." But I knew I couldn't trust him. Not anymore. The man I thought I knew turned out to be a stranger. He stood up confidently and walked quickly out of the event, so quickly that I couldn't catch up with him and lost him. Tom's words wouldn't leave my mind as I drove home from the charity event. I couldn't believe he was still trying to lie to me after all he had done. I knew I had to keep looking for him and get to the bottom of it. Going through Tom's things in our bedroom, I found a note hidden in his nightstand drawer. It was from the woman he ran off with, and it had an address on it. I realized this was my chance to find Tom. Without thinking, I got in my car and drove to the address. It was a small apartment building on the outskirts of town. When I got out of the car and headed toward the building, I felt a mixture of fear and anticipation. When I got to the apartment, I knocked on the door and a woman answered. She looked about 25 years old, had long dark hair, and a slender figure. I noticed that she was nervous when she saw me. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I'm Sarah, Tom's wife," I said firmly. "Is he here?" The woman hesitated for a moment, then nodded and stepped aside. I entered the apartment and saw Tom sitting on the couch, looking at me in surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "I found your note," I said, holding it in my hands. "I know you stayed here with it." Tom looked at me with a mixture of fear and anger. "How did you find me?" he asked. "It doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that you told me the truth. Why did you do it? Why did you betray me?" Tom looked down and sighed. "I don't know," he said. "I was miserable, and I thought that was the only way to find happiness." "That's no excuse," I said, feeling my anger rising. "You could have talked to me. We could have worked things out together." "I know," Tom said, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I'm so sorry." But I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. I knew I still had a lot of work to do to make things right. I stood in the doorway of the apartment and looked at Tom with a mixture of anger and sadness. I had finally found him, but now I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to forgive him and try to fix our marriage, but another part of me was furious that he had betrayed me so deeply. "Sarah, please," Tom said, getting up from the couch and approaching me. "Let's talk about this." I took a step back, feeling my heart pounding frantically. "Talk about what, Tom?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You betrayed me. You stole all our money and ran off with another woman. What's there to talk about?" "I know I messed up," Tom said, reaching out to touch my hand. "But I'm here now. Let's work this out together." I recoiled from him, feeling a surge of anger. "No, Tom," I said firmly. "I can't just forgive you like that. You have to take responsibility for what you did." Tom's face lowered, and I could see the guilt written on his face. "I know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know I messed up, Sarah. I'll do anything to make it right." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Okay," I said slowly. "Okay, let's start with the money. How much did you take?" Tom hesitated for a moment before answering. "About $50,000, he said. "But I can pay it back. I'll do whatever it takes to make it right, Sarah." I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. That's a start. But we also need to talk about us. About our marriage. Do you still love me, Tom? Tom looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the doubt in his eyes. "I don't know," he finally said. "I thought I did, but then it got so complicated. I'm not sure how I feel anymore." I felt a lump form in my throat and wiped away the tears. "It's not enough, Tom," I said, my voice shaking. "You have to figure out what you want, and you have to do it fast, because I can't just sit around and wait for you to make a decision." Tom nodded, looking defeated. "I know," he said quietly. "I'll try, Sarah. I'll try to figure it all out." For a few moments, we stood in silence, and I could feel the tension in the air. Part of me wanted to run away, to give up and start over. But another part of me was determined to fight for my marriage, to make it work no matter what. "Okay," I finally said, breaking the silence. "Let's start with the money. We need to figure out how to pay them back and how to pay the bills." Tom nodded, looking relieved. "Okay," he said. "I'll do whatever it takes, Sarah. I promise." Soon I got up and went home, hoping for Tom's promises. The days passed like a fog. I realized that Tom's words were a sham, and I was seized with anger and resentment toward Tom. I couldn't believe he had betrayed me like that, and I was determined to get my revenge. I spent hours studying bank statements and credit card bills, trying to figure out exactly where Tom had spent our money. Finally, I found something, a hotel reservation for two, booked under an assumed name. I knew what I had to do. I spent the day getting ready, making sure I had everything I needed. And then, under the cover of darkness, I went to the hotel. When I arrived, I saw Tom's car parked out front. My heart was racing, and I made my way inside, keeping my head down and trying to blend in with the other guests. Soon, I saw Tom and his new woman sitting together at the hotel bar. My anger subsided, and I felt satisfied as I approached them. "Well, well, well," I said, my voice cold and harsh. "What do we have here?" Tom's face went pale, and the other woman looked at me with confusion. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Tom asked, his voice trembling. "I'm here to take what's mine," I said, narrowing my eyes. "You thought you could just run off with another woman and steal all our money. Well, guess what, Tom? I'm not going to let you get away with it." The other woman looked at Tom in shock and then turned to me. "I didn't know he was married," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear I didn't know." I ignored her, focusing on Tom. "You're going to pay for what you did, Tom," I said, my voice low and menacing. "And I'm going to make sure of it." Tom looked at me with fear in his eyes, and I knew I had him. Soon, I filed a police report and hired a lawyer. Then we started the trial, which lasted 6 months. It worked out so that I won the trial, and Tom was ordered to give me our money and moral damages. That's when I realized that I had succeeded in getting back at Tom. My life seemed to be getting better, and I was making new acquaintances.